Thank you so much, Michelle, and thanks to Alan, Agnes, Araceli for organizing this event, and for the city and all the committee that selected all these panels. These panels have been amazing. I have to say before I start. I mean, as a chair, I hear a lot about difficulties of this online transition that pandemic forced on us, and then the issues with enrollment we have. And I'm listening to the panels, and I'm thinking I have no idea where we have issues with enrollment with these amazing courses that are being taught here. So I mean, I applaud everybody here for the courses they present and the plan. Our online cultural studies program was accepted into the university by the THECB last year, but a non-online iteration of the program was there for a while before, and in that program. There's two courses, 5300 and 5301, which are the introductory courses, and Annie and I have always taught those courses, and we've always had been communications about those courses. So that led to sort of this spirit of collaboration that we ended up engaging with for these two classes in particularly, which are cultural studies 5340, Hispanic cultural studies, which the subtopic is eco-critical studies, and then cultural studies 5350, which is Ani Mukhopadhyay's class, which is sustainable humanities. I should say the first collaboration I did in this university with other faculty was actually with the faculty with Christine Reiser, a faculty in English at that time was Zach Watson, and another and Marco Iñiguez. We did a course on the exploring the South Texas archives. Very amazing summer course we did, and on that course there were really difficulties in terms of how to get faculty to collaborate within the structure of the university, the pay structure of the system. So what Annie and I did in this course is say, look, let's co-teach two courses together around, because these both courses we were planning more or less around the same themes, but different regions, etc., and a few differences. And then let's both of us be in each other's classes and teach the courses at the same time. I'll go to your classes every Tuesday, you'll come to my classes every Wednesday, or vice versa actually, and we'll join the conversation with the students. Now the fact that we had a common student body made this very easy, because pretty much both classes had the same students, I think, except for one student that wasn't in one of the classes. And this really allowed us to create this engagement of continuity of themes, of coursework, and of conversation with the students. And above all, it allowed students to engage not only with both courses simultaneously, but also see sort of the engagement faculty, because Annie and I got into conversations and discussions at time in our presentations. And so students saw faculty having this debate and these dialogues, almost like demonstrating to a student, look, this is the level of discourse you have when you converse about these texts, and so we created all these collaborative digital strategies to work with this. And I have to say, in the process, one of the amazing things, this is not really anywhere in the presentation, because the presentation deals with students, but one of the most amazing things I will say from my part is that seeing another faculty teach, especially one as accomplished as Annie in his teaching, was extremely fruitful. I mean, I learned so much throughout the whole semester, just seeing how Annie interacts with students online, and that was extremely helpful. The common focus was sustainable futures in Hispanic and world literatures. That was the common focus on the theme, and what really drove the presentation from the first article we read, which was an article that posed a question about sustainability for for cultural studies as a discipline in the future. So that idea of how to envision a sustainable digital pedagogy also became part of the conversation that drove this course, especially in this post-pandemic era we have. I'm gonna let Annie. We're gonna tag team between slides, so I'm going to let Annie.
Yes. So can everybody hear me? I think so. So I want to echo Roberto and thank everybody involved in organizing this wonderful symposium, this conference, and particularly now more than ever, just sharing high impact practices is so very crucial for us. So I'm going to carry on from where Roberto left off and read out basically the thesis for our presentation, which is that we need to facilitate the transition to a virtual learning environment, or in order to, as we facilitate the transition to a virtual learning environment, we must reimagine our pedagogical approach instead of merely translating material developed for face-to-face interactions for online delivery. And this is something that I've believed for a really long time, that you're really dealing with two completely different platforms. And yes, I mean, to a certain extent, you're adapting your material, but you also need to rethink your teaching approach and your material and also your engagement with the students. So what does this really mean? Reimagine, what does it mean to reimagine student engagement in the virtual classroom? You really, I mean, when I'm teaching face-to-face, and I'm sure when many of us are teaching face-to-face, there are certain days when there's a certain amount of coursework that we need to cover. We also usually tend to have some student activities, but in a virtual platform, even 20 minutes of somebody talking, even 10 minutes of somebody talking can really be students can lose focus. And so you need to think about organizing your lesson plan and have a lot of student activity, interactivity built in. It's also very important to set expectations for the virtual classroom. And here I think Roberto agrees with me, that it's very important for the university to set expectations for the virtual classroom, keeping in mind that there are social and economic disparities with our students. We have a very diverse student body. Some students may have better access to resources like, better computers or faster internet speeds. But the point is, some basic expectations need to be set. Otherwise, faculty individually have to go, well, you have to keep your webcams on, or at some point you do have to turn your webcams on. Otherwise, what we are seeing is students need to be motivated, and they know that they need to be pushed to engage, because otherwise we have students saying, oh, I'm at work every day, I'm just logging on to listen, and that's not ideal for student engagement. Or students are saying, well, I actually drive a tow truck, and I'm driving the tow truck as I'm listening, and that just simply doesn't work. We also need to re-envision the duty profile for faculty to incorporate time and resources for digital proficiency, because it is time consuming. And post-pandemic, we don't really know. We are hoping to go face-to-face in the fall semester, but things might rapidly change. There might be another pandemic in the future. And lots of universities before the pandemic wanted to embrace online delivery. We took our cultural studies program online. When you are thinking of an online program, you also have to incorporate in the faculty's duty profile that this person is going to get credit for spending time to learn about different digital applications that's going to make this person a better teacher. We also have to embrace the virtual instead of just thinking of it as a stopgap. And then I already talked about rethinking the 50-minute lecture session. And then we'll, in the course of the presentation, discuss how to embrace multimodality regarding course texts and pedagogical deliveries.
And then some important lessons I think we gathered out of this semester, and actually the course was a result of the first thing that we were doing, which is evaluating successes and failures of the pandemic enforced transition in our own courses. So I think that we still have to go through a lot of assessment in terms of our successes and failures in to say challenges in terms of the online the massive amount of online courses we created, and then how do we even how do we allocate faculty to certain courses, because I have faculty, for example, in my department that are amazing at creating online lectures, video lectures that they just transmit to students, and it's a fully online course, where I have other faculty that are excellent, very engaging in video conferencing courses. So the way we allocate all those resources are critical, and they're just resources for faculty to prepare, but also resources for faculty to be able to do all these assessments. I think are fundamental. Especially, I mean, I'll reiterate one thing that Annie said, especially as we rethink the virtual ecosystem into the future, because I understand that the push is to go as quickly as possible in the university face to face. And one thing I'm loving about this high impact conference is that, we actually need to start thinking of how to prepare for what's going to be inevitably other iterations of fully online modalities for the university, and so I think those two things are fundamental. I think we need to also rethink digital pedagogies and reorient the conversation in terms of, that sustainability for our future. And like Ani said, not taking into account the disparities that exist socially, environmentally. And finally, one thing that we did in the course that we're going to speak probably a little bit more in a second is how to combine digital literacy with professional growth, and we'll talk about that in a second more thoroughly.
So just to quickly go over the strategies for engagement that we developed, and we will cover these strategies one by one. So you have teaching students to develop grant proposals, which was Roberto's idea. And I think this is very, very important because it's usually something that you learn after you get a job. Enabling students to share research through class presentations so that they can take control of the class. Introduce them to digital projects and pedagogies. Setting up a conversation with a PhD student and her advisor from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. So helping students build networks. I'm going to very quickly show a whiteboard feature on my tablet that I integrated into my class, because I've actually spoken to some other faculty members who said that this is something that they've been struggling with, like having like a whiteboard behind them and writing on it, and then using diverse texts. And this is the multimodality, like films, documentaries, short stories, graphic narratives, to really give them the full, spectrum of using all the different formats that we have literary and cultural text in, and that we can maximize through the virtual environment.
So then one of the things we wanted to incorporate, and actually Annie's history in the department since he came in developing professionalization workshop is where I got this idea. And he does these classes where he, towards the end of the semester, he has all these job interviews with the students as part of the workshops he does to professionalize students in the classroom and get them engaged with the notion of this is what you're going to do. When you finish your career here, you're going to step into a job environment and you need to be able to prepare for this. So one of the things I want to do with the graduate students is, teach them a little bit about the importance of grant development as they move into academia towards PhD and towards a career in academia. Because in my experience, this is something that I began to learn and to understand very relatively late into my career. So we designed the project in one class was fundamentally a sort of a traditional paper research project, but in the other class, the project was to actually develop a grant, and the students had to go through the whole motions of searching for a grant and producing a plan for a grant. And the one thing that I would say that I noticed and the students struggle with the most is the notion that beyond what they understand in their career in their career in cultural studies, which is, you know, I analyze text, I discuss text, and I go into a critical writing process in my research. They really struggle with this move towards, okay, I need to plan something for, as part of me thinking about how does my work fit into an organization. Like, that step in the process was really challenging because they hadn't thought about it. They just had this very individual sense of what their research is, and to open them to the fact that, look, you have to develop a project that benefits a community. So think of what is the community you're benefiting in your campus. How do you organize your project around this community, etc. They weren't allowed to write a project which was, I'm going to ask money for a research to do a book or an article. They had to organize a project for the institution. So I think that was very, very, very enlightening for them.
And then here's how we try to make our classrooms interactive. We use, and these are, of course, strategies I'm sure many of you use, and strategies that we have learned from our colleagues, our peers. But, you know, using Zoom to create breakout rooms. Almost every class session, we begin with some free writing activity, some workshopping, coming up with some questions. I remember we had the students watch a movie and read an article, and then there was a sort of conference session and a sort of discussion session. And Marco sort of suggested, well, you know, create questions and give them to the students beforehand so that they can have some basic ideas, questions set up, comments set up before you begin the class session. We also, one of the assignments that I designed, so they watched a movie and then I showed them how to do research and find academic articles. And then each student had an academic article assigned to them. So the discussion of that movie was really the students each talking about what their article argued and how they understood that argument and how they engaged with that argument and responded to that argument. And that was a really good way of letting the students take control of the class session, as opposed to just having like a lecture. Then we introduce students to digital projects. This is something that I think is very, very important. I took them to the websites of various other universities to show them that universities are embracing digital research centers, including taking them to our South Texas archives and showing them the treasure trove of information that's there, and telling them that the various faculty in the department take their students to the South Texas archives, do research in the South Texas archives, and you can think about building digital projects, which is also a really, really good career move. And we had one or two students who immediately said, this is something that I'm really interested in, and it's something that I want to think about when I'm working on Dr. Vela's grant project, because I would rather write a grant for a digital project. And also, we wanted to tell them that, look, there are fellowships available, summer institutes available that you can apply to. So that's something that you would want to think about. This is the sort of little mini talk that we organized. We actually reached out to Dr. Gaurav Desai, who's a very well-known name in post-colonial studies. Normally, it would have been pretty expensive to bring him to Texas A&M University, Kingsville, and he would also have had a hard time making time for such a talk because he's the department chair. But because we could organize this virtually, he was able to make the talk. But then he also suggested that I have a PhD student who's looking at environment and architecture who would be fantastic. And we were able to set this up, and we advertised it to the larger university community, including all faculty, staff, administration, students. And the student, Catherine Hummel, did this amazing presentation where she talked about what it meant for her to transition from being a master's student to a PhD student. How did she go about planning her project? How did she go about doing research? How did she set up academic networks, going to conferences? But then she also talked about how she set up larger community networks, because the work that she's doing with the environment and architecture, it really connected her to local communities. And I think That was a really interesting conversation. And I know that there were other faculty from the university who might actually also be attending this session right now who were present. And I think this was a really good way to get the students to understand what it means to build networks. And then this is very quickly, I'm going to show you the thing about the whiteboards. And, you know, because when you write something, it attracts the student's attention, but how do we do it effectively? And I just sort of had an idea, because we have the official Zoom account, but then you can have a personal Zoom account, and many of us have tablets or smartphones. So I'm going to share. So what I would do is I would log in using my tablet with a personal account, give myself co-host privileges, and let me see if I can share the screen here. So it pulls up my whiteboard on my tablet, and then so as I write, they can see, and this, so I can draw, and then, you know, I can make this smaller. And so here are a couple of examples. Let me go back to our presentation. So they don't necessarily get to see this, my horrible handwriting and this entire, thing that I've written up at once. They basically, I mean, we as they were suggesting ideas, I was writing stuff down, and it's something very, very simple. Many of you are probably already using it, but I just figured I'll mention it because some of you may find this an interesting way of incorporating the whiteboard into your virtual classrooms. Roberto?
Yeah, that was very effective, actually, and had the way it sort of it moves away from one thing into the other, and focuses different things into the screen. The one great thing about having collaborated together is that, you know, we engage with really a lot of different texts, so and engage students with a variety of modalities of text, which really sort of change the pace of what sometimes can be sort of a monotonous type of reading if you're just reading one type of genre. So we did film, we did graphic novels, we did short stories, and all of these, of course, incorporated with critical readings that constantly informed the class and the arguments of the class. So that was very effective. The final thing I would say in terms of collaboration is, you know, again, the way we were able to do this is because we both had this class. I mean, it's really very difficult to get two faculty to teach the same class because of the way that the whole structure is, right? But one of the things that also you know, I was the one that was asking the question about digital exhaustion for both the students and the faculty. And one of the things that happened here is that, you know, the weeks that I had a really stressful time at the office, Annie was able to really sort of take the lead in most of the discussions. So that really allowed us to work together and have a really effective class week after week after week. And so, yeah, that's I think
that is our presentation. Thank you. And if you have any questions, do let us know.
Thank you so much for such an informative presentation. Araceli, did you get any questions?
I don't have any yet. I think Dr. Maria Martinez, she had a comment to everybody, and she said, I commend you for building and grant development in the course. There's a few comments, but I think they should be able to see them, right?
Yeah, with the grant, the only thing we didn't go deep into is the structure of budgets. They just did a very you know, sketchy plan of how would they use the budget of the grant. You know, we didn't go into really details of indirect costs and direct costs and all that, because I realized that initially that was a plan, but we ended up spending more time really discussing, okay, this is how you plan your idea for what it means to develop a project for your organization. A lot of conversation went into that to get them to understand that. Yeah.
I think another thing I hope, and I'm pretty sure just from student feedback that our students have really been able to embrace this because you had the Hispanic cultural studies, and then I kind of do focus on world literature. We were talking about environmental issues locally and globally, but also, you know, connecting to local contexts, which is also something that I think they figured out through that grant development project, where you have this big idea, but how do you make it relevant to the communities around you?
I see Stephen Chumley has a question. What is the next step with these students' projects? Well, they're doing presentations on both the grant projects and the research papers. Some of them will be presenting on the symposium for the Student Academic Symposium, which is going to take place. If Michelle helps me with that, I'll appreciate it. I don't have the flyer with me right now, but there was a call for proposal for the symposium. So if you have any students that would like to present on an upcoming symposium on the research they've done this semester, the Hispanic Honor Society Students Academic Students Symposium takes papers on every subject available. You know, Spanish, English. I think there've been presentations on French. But the students were made aware that they should try to construct projects that fit into a grant cycle that they could work towards the future, so that they could actually, if there was a possibility to move these projects forward as actual ongoing projects that would be presented, they could then collaborate with a faculty member, me or Annie, right, and submit these projects. So there's some interesting ones there. So we'll see what happens with that.
Stephen, I would definitely say that this is actually part of our focus on professional growth and professional development. We did actually spend a class session where we talked to them about you know, conferences in this area, in this field that they can apply to. And this is also one of the requirements of the degree, which is they have to present a conference paper at the local or regional level at least, but they could do national, international. And what we also conveyed to them, that because of the pandemic, even into 2022, most conferences are virtual, which means they don't have to travel. If they do get accepted, they can most probably present virtually. So there are all of these opportunities that we emphasize, and really sort of pushing them to okay, not only do these grant development projects and research projects for the class, but to send out abstracts. And
one of the things, let me say, one of the things that happened in early in the semester, and it wasn't planned this way, just you know, with my undergraduates, I take the initial classes of the semester to talk to them about, you know, the need to be professional in the class, and the fact that even though these are online classes, they, you know, because early on when the pandemic, I had students like taking classes, you know, they would turn to computers and they would be in the bedroom there. And I told them, you know, if you have to be in a situation that is not professional and you're driving your car or something, I'd rather you be there in the class than not. So you know, be there. Although when they were driving, I always tell them, you know, disconnect and you can see they record and don't be driving. But sometimes students were in the passenger car taking the class, which was fine. I mean, but I try to encourage this level of professionalization in the virtual environment. But what happened with this class actually is that when we introduced, we never talked about that level of professionalization, partly because we think, okay, these are graduate students. But when we began introducing the whole professionalization aspect of the grant, the result of that was that the students suddenly, you know, I think they found themselves sort of engaging with the class in a different way, simply because they felt encouraged, or I mean, they felt the initiative to participate in that higher level. I mean, it was a very organic thing that happened. They would always have the cameras on. The presentations in the screen was always, you know, very professional, which wasn't always the case with my online graduate classes. You know, sometimes sometimes the classes, you know, students would be in different settings, they wouldn't turn the cameras on, etc. In this class, it was rare that the students would have their cameras off, and it was rare that it would be in a situation that was either disruptive or not conducive to them. Even though there were always moments here or there, but for the most part, it was. And I think it was a lot to do with this conversation, not about professionalization directly. You know, you have to be professionals, but more about the fact that, okay, this is what we want you to do as you engage with the idea you have over your career. We're going to engage with this grant writing project. This is part of what you do when you become an academic. This is part of how you facilitate your ability to build programs through funding, etc. That whole conversation really shifted their participation in class in a positive way.
Sorry,
I
I
would
think
imagine-
y'all saw my email inbox. I was trying to share the Sigma Delta Pi call for papers, so sorry about that.
Yeah,
but I can
not a problem.
certainly send that out
Yeah.
later.
I think, let me see if I have it here, and I'll share it. But I would imagine that when one talks about these internships, sort of that same sense sort of takes place in terms of the students, engagement. So yeah, so it's the 24th Sigma Delta Pi Symposium, Thursday, April 22nd. That's the call for abstracts. If anybody wants to take a picture or take a note of that. Marco Iñiguez, who I believe is presenting in a few minutes, is the co-organizer with the students, the Hispanic Honor Society, Sigma Delta Pi Hispanic Honor Society. This event takes place twice a year, so students always have an opportunity to present and again, from all disciplines. This event started as a way to have students practice their presentations for what was called the Pathway Symposium that took place in the university system, and from there it evolved into a symposium that the students organize biannually. Yeah.
I want to thank you
Sure,
both
exactly.
for a great presentation, but it is time to move to the next one. So Dr. Vela.